You're tuned in to the Benton County Public Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Benton County government at your service every day. Benton County is a great place to live and work. For more information about Benton County and a career with Benton County, visit co.benton.or.us. Welcome to Episode 3 of the Benton County Public Podcast, where we take a deeper dive into topics the community cares about. My name is Dan Crall. I am your host for this episode. Benton County strives to be transparent. Your feedback is very welcome. You can always feel free to reach out to pioinfo@bentoncountyor.gov with your questions or feedback. On today's episode, I am joined by 3 experts in the field of emergency management and fire safety. We are joined by Bryan Lee, who is the emergency manager for Benton County.
Hello, everyone.
We are also joined by Sandy Roberts, who is the PIO, that's Public Information Officer, for the Albany Fire Dept, and for the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Incident Management Team. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And last but not least, we are also joined by Leo Williamson, who is the Protection Unit Forester for the Oregon Department of Forestry's Philomath Unit. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Well, why don't we start off the discussion? I guess we could speak with Leo and Sandy about the latest fire season. And we recorded this podcast in late June of 2023. So as far as the 2023 fire season, what's that been like so far?
Yeah, so fire season 2023 here in Benton County is off to an earlier start than usual. If our records are correct, it's the earliest we've been in fire season since 1992 here. Looking at our fuel conditions on the ground, we're about a month ahead of schedule than what we typically are at this time. That's just due to cumulative drought conditions that we've been experiencing here. So we had some localized intense rain events in the late spring, which may have clouded some people's judgment of where we're at in terms of fire season. But again, we look at the big picture and what weather patterns are doing over multiple years. And, what led us, again, to this point today is the cumulative effect of droughts and the fact that, in this late spring and early summer, the rain just seems to have shut off a little bit earlier than usual. So we are in fire season a bit earlier than typical this year.
That's funny you mention that because I remember, I'm not an expert on climate or fire safety, but I remember this winter it being especially wet, and I kind of felt this sense of relief that, maybe we won't have such a dry, hot summer, and the snowpack will be where it needs to be, but that's not where we're at, huh? Yeah,
so again, we had some periods of intense rain this winter and early spring, but it shut off quite early this year. So when we don't get those extended rains into early and mid-June, which is fairly typical weather pattern for this area, things tend to dry out quickly. It's evident in our fuel moistures. We've seen lower humidities earlier in the season this year. Extended periods of no rain. I think we reached north of 30 days straight with no rain before some of the rain we received this previous weekend. So again, we look at the big picture, and when we have these cumulative effects year after year and a typical, non-typical moisture pattern for this part of the year, that dictates our decision to go into fire season a little bit earlier this year.
Now, when you say typical, if we're looking just the last few years since, say, 2020, with climate change being an actual factor that can't be ignored, does it feel typical then to have just dry fire seasons, summer after summer?
Yeah, certainly. We're seeing a trend, I would say, over the last 10 to 15 years, specifically of fire seasons that start earlier, last longer, and end later than previous years. Looking into the crystal ball, it seems like we certainly are moving towards this being more typical conditions. Our weather patterns seem to be changing a bit. We're getting these periods of extended, absence of moisture earlier in the season. Again, we really sort of rely locally here on that early to mid-June rain to sort of stave off fire season until, early July. It's fairly common historically for us to go into fire season here right around that July 4th time frame, if we can. But again, we follow the calendar, not the conditions. So if what the weather conditions are saying on the ground is that, our fuels, our conditions are there that it can support fire growth, then when we're going to go into fire season.
Thank you to Leo Williamson. He, again, is the Protection Unit Forester for the Oregon Department of Forestry's over in Philomath. And I'd like to ask you, Sandy Roberts, from the Albany Fire Department, what have you seen with the fire season this year so far in 2023?
Well, the city of Albany is in both Lynn and Benton County, and so our fire response is in both counties, and we give fire protection and suppression for both Lynn and Benton County. And where the public would have seen the effects of this early fire season is we implemented backyard burn bans early this year. The cutoff date is June 15th, and we put a backyard burn ban, and your local fire defense board chiefs and which includes the ODF, decided to cut off burning at June 4th, and it was because of dry conditions. There was also the consideration of wind. We've been having a lot of wind in the valley. People have probably noticed that when they're gardening and out and about. We've had higher winds than we would normally see this time of year. We expect those windy conditions in July and August with warmer weather. So we decided, the Fire Defense Board chiefs decided to put that cutoff early to reduce any fires that we may see within city limits and out in areas that we provide suppression.
So it's a full burn ban, no agricultural burning?
No, it's not a full burn ban. That's a big misconception, especially within cities. It's what we call a backyard burn ban. So a backyard burn ban means any burning that you want to do of vegetation that you have cut, clipped, mowed from your backyard. It's really easy for people to do a little burn pile. And so that is what is restricted right now. People can have a recreation fire in their backyard. That's
so like
the
a
question.
Fire pit or
if it's within a fire pit and a designated fire pit.
But no piles of branches.
No, that is banned now. And if you look around the state, that happened early for most counties. I watched Clackamas and Multnomah and Wasco County and lots of other counties, and that happened quite early this year. But that's the biggest question we get is about those recreation fires. Can people still have those? And currently in their backyard, they can still have those little fire pits.
Why don't we clarify, so the burn ban that we have going on right now as of June 2023, and which will probably last into the summer, what specifically should residents know? You said a fire pit is okay, but no backyard burning. Do you have any other tips for people who maybe are accustomed to doing backyard burns or even just recreational fires in a fire pit?
Wow, there's a lot of recommendations from those two questions. I'll start with the backyard burning. There's many resources that people can look to. They can look to the Benton County website. They can look to the Lynn County website. They also want to contact I was about to say DEA. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
They want to contact their county burn lines. Each county has a burn line. They're going to call into that line, and they're going to let them know based on the weather and smoke reports. They look at levels of smoke in the air and decide, is it a good day to burn? And so they need to call that burn line first. And then it's keeping piles to a manageable size, having a water source.
Well, I could say that the burn line number is, in Benton County, 541-766-6971. If you look right now, for instance, as we're recording this, I'm looking at Google and it says burning advisory, has the phone number, generally updated after 8:15 a.m. each morning. More information, of course, online. And I'm seeing here the first page coming up is the Benton County website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, I mean, with us being in fire season, with the Department of Forestry declaring fire season, that's in partnership with our fire defense boards as well. And so when we declare fire season, again, it's a conversation with the fire defense boards, and between ODF and them, we're lockstep in regulating burning within our jurisdictions. So the message here is that no debris burning within fire season. If you're unsure about your campfire or the location where you want to have one, please call your local department. And whether you're within one of these municipal departments, so Corvallis or Albany, or whether you're outside of their jurisdiction and within ODF's protection, please call the appropriate office, and there are folks there who are happy to help and answer your questions and provide any clarification. So, looking at these burn advisories, sometimes they say it's a burn day, but also in those it says to please contact your local department. And again, with us being in fire season, please no debris burning at this time.
Why don't we also, while we're on that subject, discuss defensible space? I feel like a lot of people who rent or who are homeowners may not even be familiar with what defensible space means. Sandy Roberts, would you like to tackle this one?
Sure. Defensible space is looking at your environment, i.e. your home, and how well is it defended against fire. You could look at it from the perspective as how well is it defended against flood? How well is it defended against a tornado? We encourage people to look at their home as a firefighter would look at their home. Where are the points in their home that can be most affected by fire? And then we start at the home itself, looking at your roof. What's your roof made of? How old's your roof? Do you have vegetation that's on top of your roof? When's the last time you cleaned out your gutters? And then moving down the walls of the home, do you have points within the house that embers could enter your home? Do you have open sashes where embers could enter into the attic?
Say during like a big wildfire, embers in the air.
Yeah, how can you screen off and make your home more defendable against fire? Most homes, there's a lot of research that shows most homes are affected by ember showers, not fire itself. Embers, all it takes is one to find a fuel, and your house is a fuel for a fire. So you want to look at the whole 360 space of how can you protect it against those embers. And that means the roof, the walls, and then the base of your home. What's around the base of your house? So for instance, if you like bark mulch versus rock around the base of your home, which is most likely to ignite? It's going to be the bark mulch, right? So it's taking that critical eye like a firefighter would to say, how can I defend this space? And then there are some rules about moving out, some basic rules about looking at the vegetation around your home to stop the spread of fire. Foresters use it in the forest, and creating space between trees and what we call canopy cover. And can fire jump from one canopy to the next? Well, it's looking at your vegetation around your home. Can the fire in the canopy of a tree jump to the roof of your house? How will it spread around your home? There's also fire-adapted plants that you can use instead of highly flammable plants like arbovita, juniper, things that have a high oil concentration.
Right, that oil burns hot too.
Yeah. It's looking at, do you manage your land? Like, how tall is your grass? Do you let it dry out? There's lots of different ways to look at the vegetation around your home, and every home is going to be different based on your environment that you live in. If you live rurally, it's going to be different than whether you live in suburban Corvallis.
And I should ask, what is a good rule of thumb for how far shrubbery or trees or vegetation should be away from the house?
So all these recommendations should be taken into consideration of city codes, county codes, state codes. If you live in a city, you're going to have vegetation codes around trees and plants and or animals. We don't want people just going out into their front yard and cutting down a tree. You need to look at the codes around what's acceptable for being able to trim, cut, all of those things. So please take a look at your those codes and how they affect you. But some basic rules are, is your tree canopy touching your home? We don't want that, right? Because if the fire were to be up into a tree canopy and it's touching the roof of your house, we know that fire will spread to your roof, right? So it's trimming those areas around your home in the tree canopy. From the ground up, the recommendation is 6 feet. So 6 feet from the ground up, limbing, so that you don't get that ladder climb. If you have vegetation that's growing up trees, you definitely have what we call ladder fuels. And so if fire is on the ground, it's going to spread to those ladder fuels and climb up into a tree. So looking at your trees, 6 feet up, pruning them.
So if one has evergreens outside of their bedroom window, 6 feet away is a good
recommendation. And because everyone's home's different, referring to different websites that we have, resources in the state, is a great idea. Oregon State Fire Marshal just released a brand new website. It's called OregonDefensibleSpace.org. ODF has a fantastic website that for defensible space, as does FireWise. You can Google FireWise. It's going to pull it right up. And all these recommendations, not only in writing, but in pictograph, which I find really helpful when I can see a picture of something. FireWise does an amazing job of showing you those images and helping it reference to your house.
You're listening to the Benton County Public Podcast. We are joined today by Sandy Roberts, who is the Public Information Officer for the Albany Fire Department, as well as the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Incident Management Team. We're also joined by Bryan Lee, who is the Emergency Manager. We are also joined by Bryan Lee, who is the Emergency Manager for Benton County, as well as Leo Williamson, the Protection Unit Forester for the Oregon Department of Forestry's Philomath Unit. We'll be back after a short break.
Do you know about fentanyl? Fentanyl is a powerful opioid that has made its way into the illegal drug supply. Fentanyl has no taste or smell and is being sold as common pills or in party drugs. Just a tiny amount can stop your breathing in seconds. Naloxone is a medication to reverse opioid overdose and can help save lives. It is available at no cost to certain individuals. Benton County Health Department wants everyone to learn more about fentanyl, naloxone, and ways to stay safe. You can type Fentanyl Aware Benton County into your search engine to learn more. That's FENTANYL in Benton County.
You're listening to the Benton County Public Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dan Crall, and before we move on from discussing defensible space, as we are discussing fire safety and local aspects of it, Leo Williamson has some information on what the Oregon Department of Forestry can offer.
So much like the resources that Sandy mentioned, ODF has similar capacity when it comes to preparing homeowners for defensible space and making their homes more defendable from a wildfire. So locally here in Benton County, I employ what we call a community wildfire forester, and that individual will come out and do a home assessment on request for anybody within the county who's looking to get some clarity on how they should move forward on their property. So if they have questions on tree spacing or what they should do with their wood pile or what species they should plant, anything like that that concerns defensible space around their home, give us a call locally at ODF's Philomath Unit office, and we can set up a time to come out and meet you on site and talk about those things. Additionally, that individual manages a series of grant programs that tend to rotate throughout the entirety of our district. So, I work out of the Philomath unit, but ODF is a state organization, and within our district we have a series of other counties that we provide service to. So those grants rotate throughout the county based on continuity of fuels treatments, underserved communities, areas that haven't received treatment prior, and we prioritize through a consult with the community wildfire protection plans for each county on how to put those grants in place on the ground where they make sense most. So there may be an opportunity to use grant dollars to help conduct that fuels reduction work on your property. And if there's questions on any of this, or you're hoping to schedule a site visit, you can call our office at 541-929-3266.
You're listening to the Benton County Public Podcast. We always welcome your feedback on the podcast. If you have ideas of episodes you'd like to hear, various topics you would like to hear discussed on the podcast, we are always open to an email at pioinfo@bentoncountyor.gov. My name is Dan Crall. We are joined today by 3 different experts regarding fire safety and preparedness. And right now we're going to speak with Bryan Lee. He is the emergency manager for Benton County, and he's going to discuss local plans and preparation for fire season and how Benton County specifically is prepared.
Thanks, Dan. So what I really want to talk about is what plans we put in place going into fire season. Really, emergency management takes a all hazards approach. So really, all of our plans and preparations are geared towards any hazard, any emergency, any disaster. But there's a couple things we do specifically for wildfire season. A couple of those plans include our emergency operations plan, our community wildfire protection plan, and our natural hazard mitigation plan. Those all outline general roles and responsibilities of different agencies, as well as priority projects that we'd like to implement to mitigate some of the impacts of wildfires and natural disasters. Some of the bigger things that we focus on going into wildfire season are our coordination meetings. Sitting here with some of our state agencies and local partners, we really rely on these meetings and trainings and exercises to really sync up our best practices, our communication methods, and what we expect to get out of each other during an emergency response. Each month, we train our emergency operations center staff to respond to emergencies, and particularly in a support function, and to cover operations like mass care and sheltering, volunteer and donations, continuity of operations, and resource coordination. And then we test them in their training capabilities during our exercises every quarter. We also do a lot of tabletop exercises with our local and state partners, as well as private sector partners as well. And again, that's just to make sure that we all understand the right roles and responsibilities and really what we're trying to achieve, which is resource coordination and protection of the public. The last thing we do with our plans is really utilize some of our software tools. We have a couple new software tools that we're really excited about that we're kind of tinkering around with that can help us with some zoned evacuation, and as well as different modeling of not only fire and hazmat, but also traffic modeling. So we can see what areas are impacted, and then what areas we would need to have traffic control points, and where we might have choke points with evacuation strategies. So that's kind of our litany of areas that we focus on, and some general strategies of what we do to prepare for wildfire season and all hazards.
So in the case of, this year, if we were to have a wildfire maybe similar to 2020 where the air is brown and there are flaming embers blowing through the dry air, what kind of action would your team take if, say, we were approaching a level 2 or 3 evacuation?
Sure. Let's talk about evacuations real quick on that regard.
Yeah, levels 1, 2, and 3, right?
Correct. In the state of Oregon, we all follow the different levels of evacuation, that level 1, level 2, level 3. The easier way to remember it really is the be ready, be set, go now. Sometimes it's called ready, set, go, but the general idea is at a level 1, which is the lowest level of evacuation, that be ready. We want folks to be ready to evacuate. So start paying attention to your social media, your media outlets like this one, watching your TV stations that have information. Just start start really paying attention and getting your supplies together to leave. At the level 2, which is be set or set, that level, ideally, we'd like people to actually leave at that point and go to a safe area if possible. That's the time if you have folks who need additional support evacuating, maybe they have limited mobility, or they just have extra supplies you want to bring, or pets or livestock. That's really the time to start mobilizing and get out of the area before things become very crowded and chaotic. The level 3 really is that highest level, which is the go now, and that's the imminent threat to public safety. That's usually the point where they're going door to door, letting people know that they need to leave right now, and maybe you have minutes on the higher end, sometimes just seconds to grab your stuff and get out of your house and get to a safe area.
So if we were at a level 3, would that kind of information go to people's cell phones or over the EAS systems on local radio?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, at the lower levels even, we want to send out alerts pretty much in a phased method. If a fire just started here, let's say on the edge of town, the immediately impacted area would get a level 3 alert through not only the EAS system, which is through TV and radio, but also through our Lynn Benton alert system via their cell phone, landlines, any communication method we can, we would get that alert out. And then, of course, the first responders, fire, and law enforcement would be going door to door, letting people know they needed to leave. And again, we look at that level 2, that be set as the time to go. Oftentimes, there might not be time for our responders to go back and do another level increase. At any given time, we have a handful of deputies on. Corvallis Police Department has a handful of officers, and really it's a labor-intensive process to go door to door and really track whether or not folks evacuated, and letting them know that we've gone from a level 2 to a level 3 is really challenging. So that mass notification tool is really the best way to go about it.
I'm going to shift the topic just a little bit as I remember back when we had a really bad fire season several years ago, and I went up to the area of Gates, Mill City, Idana, Detroit Lake, where there was a number of charred out homes, properties, and chunks of forest, but then you'd find these peppered in pieces of property that seemingly had not been touched by the flames. And I wondered, maybe it was because people were standing there frantically spraying the hose on the house as the fires were approaching. Can you speak to that?
I can, and really it was spoken to a little bit by Sandy Roberts and Leo Williamson regarding defensible space. Some of it is just I hate to say luck, but it's pure luck and how the embers fall. Some of it's defensible space and whether or not the embers landed on a spot that could have an ignition source. We saw that a lot in the California wildfires as well. For example, the one in 2017 in Santa Rosa, they'd have most of the homes burned down, and then there'd be one in the middle of the suburb, in the subdivision, that was totally intact. The other thing to keep in mind about some of those is that even though they physically are not burned down, they can be so heavily smoke damaged that they are a total loss as well. So that is something to consider. There's a lot of challenges, too, for the folks whose homes did survive, and now they're living there looking at destruction every day, and there's a lot of survivor guilt and other issues that can come up. But most of the time, it would generally say the studies show that it's a defensible space type issue. Sometimes, yes, if you leave your home and you leave your sprinkler system on, that can help, but really it's not going to do much for a big wildfire or a big ember wash unless you have defensible space in place.
Listening to the Benton County Public Podcast. On today's episode, which is episode 3, we have been discussing fire safety, awareness, and preparedness. We are joined by 3 guests who work in various fields of emergency management here locally. This podcast is brought to you by Benton County Government, at your service every day. Benton County is a great place to live and work. You can find more information about Benton County and a career with Benton County at co.benton.or.us. As we wrap up today's program, let's think about some of the takeaways from what we've discussed. And Bryan Lee, Emergency Manager for Benton County, what would you like listeners to really take away from today and maybe really consider?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. What I really want the community to keep in mind here is that it's really important to take preparedness actions early on. Build a kit, put together some disaster supplies, and develop some household plans, and think about what you would do, what you would take, and what routes you would take out if you had to evacuate during a wildfire or any emergency in general. The other thing, and probably the most important, I would say, is if you don't do anything else, sign up for our mass notification system. That's the Lynn Benton Alert. If you have problems with going on the website, you can go on the website. Benton County Sheriff's Office preparedness page will allow you to sign up. That's the best way. But if you have issues or you don't use email, you don't use the internet very often, you can call us at 541-766-6864, and we can manually register you. And that system is actually shared with Lynn County as well, so you can contact their sheriff's office if you need to register over there with Lynn County.
And of course, if folks are interested, on the federal level, you can just go to ready.gov to get ideas of what to put in an emergency kit. What kind of ideas do you have maybe for people specifically that live in Benton County?
Some specific supplies, really, especially for wildfire. Good clothing, a little bit of food, water, pet supplies, medications, and then your vital documents, copies of important documents, wills, driver's license, all those kind of things that if you had to grab in the middle of the night and rebuild your life afterwards, what would you need? And I would be remiss if I didn't mention those family photo albums, things of value that cannot be replaced. Those are the things you really want to grab and take with you.
All right. Bryan Lee, Emergency Manager for Benton County, thank you for your time today and for your ideas. And I would like to speak now with Sandy Roberts. Do you have any ideas that you'd like the listeners to really take away, especially as we consider, for instance, upcoming 4th of July holiday or just a dry summer?
Yeah. I think now, more than ever, being prepared before the emergency happens, whatever that emergency may be, fire, floods, all those things. But in particular, fires, look at your home for defensible space. Take the time to take that critical eye to look at your space, what work needs to be done. And if you're not sure, call your local fire agency, call the ODF, ask what resources are available, and we'll help guide you. 4th of July, yeah. If you plan on using fireworks to celebrate your 4th, part of that plan should be having a plan. So having water on hand, lighting fireworks one at a time, not allowing your children to light fireworks, making it an adult act. We want to keep our kids safe, and never relighting fireworks. When you're done, proper disposal. We have been meant to quite a few fires, including last season, right on the 4th of July, improper use into a plastic tub. They thought it was out, and they put it into a bucket, and we had a structure fire, and it was a total loss of a fourplex. So making sure that those fireworks are out, have a bucket full of water, disposing of them into the water, and letting them soak overnight. And then using legal fireworks. Anything that goes up into the air that explodes is not legal. And with our current fire status, with our current weather, if you're using illegal fireworks, you're taking a chance of putting fire up into the air and into somebody else's property, and it's the risk of fire.
Hopefully there are some stiff penalties for such inconsideration. Are there?
There are some state regulations around that. I can't really speak to what those ORSs are, but yes, I think there are some state regulations.
I do know here in Corvallis, I live in southeast Corvallis, and every year there's always at least one 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. explosion, usually going into the 4th or the 5th. And it's always nice when that goes away. I know that certain local towns like Lebanon, for instance, I've read on some of the local pages on Facebook a few years ago that it's just for usually a few weeks on either side of the 4th of July holiday, fireworks in the middle of the night and people just having a good time, but not being very considerate to, the fire safety of the area and also just people sleeping at 3 a.m. But
Yeah.
there's really not a lot you can do about that sometimes at the end of the day, huh?
Well, as a city agency, we ask that our public be safe because our job is to prevent and protect. That's our mission statement, right? And to prevent fire means not using illegal fireworks. And then, of course, just consideration of our neighbors. We always want that. As we are a neighbor at all of our fire stations, we hope that others around us will be good neighbors. That's all we can ask.
And also, consider wildlife, veterans with PTSD, children, the elderly. I mean, really, fireworks, I'm personally surprised that we still celebrate in that fashion. I mean, if we love the land that we live in, why pollute the air and disturb the wildlife? But that's just me.
And if fireworks are what you love, and that's the way you celebrate 4th of July, we at the fire department recommend you go to a planned event. At those planned big events, you've got firefighters, emergency response, and a lot of safety layers that have been put into place. And that is the safest way to experience fireworks.
Thank you, Sandy Roberts, PIO for the Albany Fire Department and the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Incident Management Team, for your time and your insight today. It's been very helpful.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Leo Williamson, I think I'm going to give you the last word. Leo, of course, is the Protection Unit Forester for the ODF. That's the Oregon Department of Forestries. He works at the Philomath Unit. Do you have any takeaway that you would like the listeners to go away with? We've discussed defensible space, preparedness, awareness. Is there anything else that you'd like to add as we wrap up today's episode?
I think really my message echoes Bryan and Sandy's quite a bit here, and it's all in the spirit of preparedness and informing yourself. We as an agency train internally, we train with our partners. We have statewide, regional, and international partners that, we put in a lot of work to be coordinated so that we have a smooth response when things do go south and folks need our help. What I would say, though, too, is that it is a group effort. Working for a state agency, we work for the people of Oregon. And to really make sure that we're safe year after year through fire season and we're minimizing acres burned and the impact to the people of Oregon, we need your help as citizens, too. So, again, it's making sure that you're informed, signing up for these emergency alerts, being aware of the fire danger in your area, adhering to our public use restrictions, because at the end of the day, the easiest fire for us to fight is the one that never starts. So if you're doing all that you can to prepare yourself to be informed, then you're playing your part in this complete and coordinated system that we operate in. And again, if there's any questions on any of this, please don't hesitate to reach out to us locally at 541-929-3266.
Thanks for joining us today for the Benton County Public Podcast. We'd love to hear from you if you have some topics that you'd like to hear discussed, or if you would like to be a guest on this podcast. The Benton County Public Podcast is always looking for suggestions. You can email us at pioinfo@bentoncountyor.gov. My name is Dan Crall. I'm the host, editor, and producer of the Benton County Public Podcast. Our theme song is by Doug Sowers. Our executive producer is Corey Grogan. Today we've been joined by Bryan Lee, who is the emergency manager for Benton County. You can find out more online at co.benton.or.us/preparedness. We were also joined by Sandy Roberts, who is the Public Information Officer for the Albany Fire Department and also the Public Information Officer for the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Incident Management Team. You can find out more online at cityofalbany.net/fire. You can also visit OregonDefensibleSpace.org for more information on creating and maintaining defensible space. Finally, we were also joined by Leo Williamson. He is the Protection Unit Forester at the Oregon Department of Forestries, the Philomath Unit. You can find more information at oregon.gov/ODF, where you can find information on public fire restrictions, defensible space, and more. Thanks for joining us today on the Benton County Public Podcast. We hope to see you next time.